my face area. You guys are really quiet. This sounds that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll see how this goes. No, let's do that first. Give me 1 second. That's what I wanted to do. Sweet. And we're live. Am I clicking on the wrong area to go full screen? Can't see it. This one? Right? This guy. There it is. There it is. OK, thank you so much. That was a lot of effort for setting up. Well, welcome, everyone. Good evening. And so who here is the first time showing up to these things? And who's here has come in the past, like many times? Hands up if it's your second, third, fourth. OK, awesome. So tonight's talk is a little bit different. Instead of talking purely on technology or the things that we want to build our platform, our technology on, a little bit of a different flavor. I want to talk a little bit about the products that we actually build in those technology. Right? And I want to spend the next couple hours just talking about the idea of risk, right? Something that we generally think a lot about, or we do think a lot about, but not in the right context, and how we go about achieving our goals as a product. Right? So what do we actually want to do? How do we deliver a successful product to our customers, and what's in our way? And I want to talk about the ways organizations and product teams can mitigate these risks. Right? How do we identify them and mitigate them so we're successful, and then we're confident that we'll actually reach our goals? Right? So there's things that are coming our way. We're not sure. How can we be confident? So I want to explore those concepts and some techniques revolving around design thinking, design research, and the value that they provide to our organization. So kind of the summary of the talk. If that doesn't interest you, have some pizza. See you later. But before I dive in, I want to know a little bit about you guys. Just kind of show of hands thing. So show of hands if you're a product manager, product owner, someone who sort of decides what we want to build. Kind of, some hands there. OK, so someone who kind of makes those decisions as to what the next story is going to be, the next epic is going to be. All right. And show of hands if you're a designer. I mean, this is a design talk after I hope someone a designer. Sweet. So what do you typically do? Like, working on mock-ups and figuring out workflows, research. Is that accurate? Yeah? OK, good. And how many of you guys are developers or someone who is actively writing the stories? OK, sweet. So a good mix, right? And I hope by the end of all this, whatever your background is, there's something that is valuable to you, or maybe it helps you appreciate the role for your colleagues, right? Because we're always working together. We're always kind of building these products together. And there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. So I hope by the end of this, you can walk away with some new ideas, maybe change the way you work, or the way you change the way you work with your colleagues. Okay, so a little bit about myself. Like Jesse said, I'm a senior product designer here in Pivotal Labs. And I sit just around the corner. So this is a really short commute for me. So thank you all for coming here. And well, a bit about what we do here in Labs. Right? We help clients build software sort of the right way with the best practices in product management, design, engineering. And I'll speak a bit more about these disciplines later on and how we all collectively work together to reduce risk, right? This idea of reducing risk and building good products. And we generally refer to it as a balanced team, so we're all working together and collaborating every day. Show of hands if you've ever been to as part of a product kickoff, beginning of a project. All right, give me a hand. Like, what are the experience like? Maybe just 1 or 2 hands up. Your hands first. Yeah. What's product kickoff?
People throw different kind of ideas, like they're trying to put kind of different thoughts about like it's not kind of a roadmap, but kind of this is the things we want to achieve, and sometimes in terms of the actual business goals, people just try to throw some sort of solution on the front as well.
Yeah, so we try and plan ahead. We want to think about what we're building.
Yes.
Any other?
Like what was the expectations from the product, and okay, we need to start a particular project. Okay, and I think we need to do this thing and this thing and this thing to actually kind of. So it's not just a pure like the kickoff.
Right.
Project perspective. Kind of people like the way they start to kind of jump into different solutions.
Yeah, and And that's very typical. Anyone else have a different perspective or experience? Project kickoff?
Something like vision and milestones, similar to what Vic did, right? But also a little bit of team forming.
Right.
As to say, hey, we're kicking off this product. Who wants to be part of this team? What do they want to work on as part of the product? Things like that.
Yeah. And typically, so at the beginning, the team or the small group at the company that's responsible for it, they get together and they think about what's ahead, right? They start planning ahead. They start thinking about what problems we want to tackle for the business, what we want to solve, what opportunities are we going after, and those are the things that we sort of aim ourselves at, right? And then we lay out the plan. We put together a team, as someone said, and we start with this big kickoff meeting with everybody, right? And someone like him would say, hey, we are going to build an awesome product. We're going to do the amazing things. We're going to be the champion in our industry, and we're going to transform. So at some point, the VP or director makes this big speech, and we get really, really, really excited about it. And that's great. But one thing that's not discussed often in those meetings, or not discussed in detail, is what can go wrong, right? We don't really want to consider Murphy's Law, right? How everything that can go wrong can go wrong. And we try to defer those discussions a little bit later on, right? We don't want to get into that. We're in a happy place right now. Everyone's very positive. We don't want to do that. It's good vibes only, but it's important to think about those things in those contexts if we're serious about building this strong product together, right? In a few months, they'll come back to bite us. In a few months, they'll derail the project. Or worse, we may realize that this problem is too late to fix, and now we're stuck. Right? So let me know if that feels similar or something you've experienced before, but there's a theme here that we feel like we all have experienced at some point. And the product then goes out in the wild, and our customers are not happy. And that's the worst part, right? Why are we even building anything if our customers are not going to be happy with it? So that's a bummer. There's so many risks that comes in the way that we don't consider. So what are those risks? Let's look at some of this. So just a little chart that I pulled, and it's looking at startups, but I feel like it applies as well to a lot of new products, new projects. Maybe you're in an enterprise organization and you have a startup team kind of formed, or maybe you're in a startup and there's something that you tackle. But among those things, there are a lot of them that actually relates to product. Right? It relates to a product decision. It relates to lack of understanding of your users. It relates to things that weren't considered well. And it's not just funding, it's not just opportunities, but things that we fail to decide properly on. Right? And the most common thing on this list is building, the first one there, no market need. Right? That's the first thing we see. Over almost 42% have that issue. That's a big problem, right? We're building something that no one actually wants, no one cares about, right? That's a problem. So it's not about the amazing technology. It's not about what cool things we're building on. It's that there's no use for it. There's no news for it. So let's talk about that. The first point, the lack of product need. This is a Samsung fridge, right? Samsung is one of the most largest appliance builder in the world, right? If you go to a Leon's, Best Buy, they all got them. They're the best ones. And a couple years ago, they were at the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, and they debuted this smart refrigerator, right? And they have fully built with advanced features, capabilities, a giant touchscreens, and you can see through it. There's cameras, but they also built a suite of apps to go along with it. Calendar, you can watch videos, you can tweet. For all I know, why are we tweeting? But you're tweeting anywhere on your fridge. And it's an impressive amount of technology that they jam into one fridge, right? They took all the things you like and it's jammed in one fridge, and it feeds you. That's pretty awesome. Right? It's got all the promises of what an IoT device has to be, right? We want it to be the future of smart technology. You can almost imagine the conversation that was had in the headquarters of Samsung, right? The VP appliance, everyone has a fridge. He's talking to his team. Everyone has a fridge, and they're using it. And wouldn't it be great if we stuck all their favorite apps together as well? That will make it sell. That will be a popular product. But the question is, do people actually want it? This is a very famous YouTube tech reviewer. I can't say his name properly. Does anyone know how to say that? Marcus Browning. So he made this tweet, and I thought it was hilarious. All the technology that you built, why don't we just stick an iPad on the fridge? Everyone's got one. You probably got an old iPad lying around at home, and we're done. Right? One of the biggest complaints about this product is that while the technology was really cool and exciting, it loses its glamour because no one's actually using it. There's no thought behind it, and so It could be cool when your friends come over and like, hey, look at my fridge. Let me send you a text. Did you get it? All right, awesome. All right, you can do that, but it loses its allure. And so instead of focusing on a real useful product, it's sort of focusing on the fun and thrill. And there's no real there's no real need. There's no market need for that. This is a huge product risk for Samsung, for everyone else who's done something similar, where we spend millions of dollars building R&D budget, getting everything fitted in there, and no one's buying it, right? There's no compelling reasons to buy something like this. Another example is Google, one of the biggest, best tech company, and there are dedicated web pages talking about products that Google have killed. If you go on there, you'll start like reminiscing the last 15 years of technology. You're like, oh yeah, that one. Where did it go? I liked it. It's gone. Right? So Google is famous for building cool things that nobody wants. Right? They're always experimenting. But the cool thing is they have the money for it. And that's because their search engine is so cool. They actually can build it. But for most of us, we don't have that luxury of just saying, try it, fail it, oh, whatever, move on. Right? So Google does that a lot. And one of the famous examples in 2013 was the Google Glass. Right? It was a revolutionary piece of technology. Right? You put it on. It's got a little display at the corner of your eyes. And it can tell you things like your weather, text messages, maybe a reminder of a meeting. Right? It has a lot of cool things. But when Google announced this product, they showed this video off. And what they failed to do was actually explain to people how it's going to be used or why they would use it. Right? How is it going to be useful for them and why they should buy this product. Right? It was an impressive tech demo, but a disappointing product. And it doesn't solve any real issue in terms of use cases. Google spent the next 4 years trying to answer that question. They had the time, 4 years. And in 2017, they finally announced the Google Glass Enterprise Program. Right, so they found people in the industry who have a very, very niche application, right, that can use this. So what are we talking about? We're talking about manufacturing. People can then take a picture as they're assembling something and then move on without their hands. Like, OK, Google, take a picture. Done. OK, move on and do something else. That's a very niche application, and it's part of their SOP, the process for building something. Or in medicine, right? Doctors can now record and see what they're seeing. There's a very niche application for it. But it was only in those circumstances. It wasn't what the promise to the mass market would be. Hey, everybody, wear Google Glass wherever you are. It's going to be great. It didn't pan out the way they thought it would be, right? It wasn't the vision that we had kind of envisioned in the beginning. So how can we have mitigated these risks? Right? What are some ways we can actually make our products wanted? So in Jeff Gottheld's book, one of the sort of the premier leaders in thinking about technology and products and agile, Jeff Gotheld, Sensor and Spawn, he talks about the way organizations fail to have real conversations with your users. It's always a one-way conversation. And what that means is I'm going to tell you what I'm building. I'm going to show you the product. And that's it. We're done. We're done talking. I don't want to hear from you. If you give me your money, great. If not, we'll try again in a few months. Right? It's not something that you're actually thinking about. But we're not very good at learning from our customers, which is half the conversation, right? Talking and learning from back. Right? In most organizations, we assess our product while it's in beta or when it's in market. But we don't have those conversations early on when we're actually building the product. That's a problem. In design thinking, we look at this idea, the first step, which is empathy. Anyone can help me define that word, what it means to you? Empathy. So empathy really is, oh, sorry, please. Yeah, understanding someone's point of view and putting yourself in someone's shoes, right? We don't do that very often. Sometimes we look at a product and we're very, very technical. Or we start thinking about what existing product do we have? How can we change it and morph it into a new use cases? But we're not starting from where the users are at. What problems do they have? Right? What it means to help them out. Empathy, in terms of design thinking, is really the first step in terms of understanding existing behaviors and also highlighting opportunities for us as a company to build a product. Samsung and Google could have benefited a lot when they're building those products from talking to their customers. This type of research is really popular in terms of design thinking. We're looking at exploratory research or generative research. We're trying to find ideas and opportunities to go after. Imagine if Samsung actually spent 20 minutes with a lot of families and just understand what they're doing in their kitchen, what their day-to-day is like, how they interact with their kids in the living room, in the kitchen, and how they plan their day. they might come up with something very different and understanding that maybe appliances isn't the right tool, or maybe not in the right way it's been built. Right? I wonder what insights that could have been learned if you're talking to Google and seeing how people are going about their day and how they feel about having glasses on and the camera technology. Those are things that was missed because they were very focused on building the technology, the product. Right? So instead of building a product based on our limited knowledge and all the assumptions that we have, we can actually find out those answers really early on when we're still in the early phase, defining the product, and to go talk to people and mitigate those things. Everything that we have as an assumption can be cleared out. Right? The second thing that we often see is a lack of product focus. And that's an interesting one. So, this isn't really the hard part, right? Figuring out a problem to solve. Once we actually identify the problem, we need to figure out how to figure it out, how to build it. And everyone's got an idea, right? I mean, in your offices, there are developers, your PM, your marketer, from your director of strategic innovation to VP of corporate jargons, everyone's got something to say. Right? Everyone wants their answer in. But pretty soon, what happens? Your product roadmap, your epics are through the roof. There's 1,000,001 things, and it's got to be done tomorrow. Right? MVP is what we're shooting for, and it's massive, viable product. And the PM comes back to you and says, well, we can ship it, but it'll be 2025 when we can actually see it launch. So good luck. And now we're begging our PMs to cut it down. What do we do? How do we cut it down? How can we get it launched by Christmas? How can we get it launched by this year, right? BBC had a really good, well, not a good example, a bad example for us to learn from. Right? The British Broadcasting Corporation wanted to build a new content management system. That was their focus. And the digital media, it was called the Digital Media Initiative. And they spend over 100 million, I'm not really sure if it's pounds or dollars, but the conversion rate is crazy. But either way, it's a lot of money. They spent a lot of money over the last 10 years trying to build this tool to manage all their content internally so that their writers or producers can quickly find content and be able to process it. Well, in 2013, that project was shut down. They couldn't finish. Right? All that money burned, all that money used, they just couldn't figure it out. And one of the biggest challenges when they're talking to people inside was there's so many competing priorities, we can never decide on the right thing, and they were just dragging on forever. And eventually the company's like, that's it, we can't do this anymore, we got to shut it down. Right? If we try to include everything in the product the way the BBC wants us to, it can't be done because everything is a lot. We'll forever be stuck in development, and product managers will pull their hairs out every day, right? And we want to push them to make decisions, but how does he or she decide what goes into the product? Is it based on what's technically possible? Is it based on who's yelling at him the most and what pressure's coming down the pipeline? What's more urgent? Is it now or is it next year? How does he make that decision? So prioritization is a tool you see a lot of PMs use. Who's here is kind of seeing a 2x2 and deciding what's important, what's not, easy, not kind of thing. And we have finite resources, so we rely on 2x2 as a tool to figure out what we should build. And as IT professionals, I think we're usually pretty comfortable with estimating maybe effort, complexity based on our experiences. We know the difference between building a web page and an advanced microservice architecture. We know what the differences between those two are. But what about value? Are we really good at addressing the value of a product or a feature that we're shipping to our users? Generally not. Right? We look at things from our own lens, but we don't have the insight to look at what everyone else who will be using your product is going to think. That's usually lost on us. So when we make our PMs make these prioritizations, a lot of times it's a guess. Right? We think this is more valuable because I said it's more valuable. Right? Or we think it's more valuable because our competitors are doing it and we want to keep up. That's even the worst thing, right? Because we're not even sure why we're doing it. If that bank's doing it, I guess we should do it too, right? We don't want to fall behind. But by applying design research, we can actually validate those assumptions often and early on, right? So if we have competing values, decisions, and features we want to make, why not actually build a prototype and test it and learn from people? Do you like option A or option B? Is it going to help you with this existing workflow, or is it not going to do it just as well? Those are conversations you can have early on before you even write code, before you even lay out a roadmap, because you're not even sure what you're building yet. And oftentimes that's missed. Oftentimes we go straight into building, and now we feel really lost. Like, why isn't no one liking our product? We spent 6 months already in development. So that can be a mistake. And it's very expensive as well, time consuming, right? Now you're either late to market or you're spending a lot of dollars and time on this that it's going to all go to waste. So if we can evaluate our features correctly early on, it will help the business a lot, but also you'll build a really valuable product for our users. And the third thing that comes to happen is building the wrong solution. In 2004, Netflix launched this new a Friends feature on their app. 2004 was a long time ago, by the way. So who here was using Netflix in 2004? Or heard of like Netflix? Back when they had DVDs, but this is the beginning when they were getting onto streaming platforms. And they had this problem where they wanted to know how people can find content, right? And the idea, by the way, in 2004, a very strange time, everyone wanted a social media strategy. Every company, everyone and their dog had a social media strategy. And it was a cool thing that people talked about, and Netflix was going to go on the same bandwagon as everyone else. So what they came up with was, well, why don't you add your friends, and we're going to invite them, share accounts, and we're going to see what you're watching. So Matthew, what are you watching? Tell me. And I'm going to see your list. And I'm going to see your list. I'm going to see your list. And that will be a good way to help me figure out what I should watch. Well, this is a feature you probably don't remember because it disappeared. Didn't work. It was a total failure, and that's why we don't see it anymore. Netflix was only able to engage 2% of their user with this feature, and the product was scrapped in 2010. Stuck around for a while, but eventually it died. But the cool thing about Netflix was, though they took this huge risk, Netflix wasn't sitting still. They took the time, and they started evolving. Right? So this was their first attempt. This is their MVP, where they thought, how can we solve the problem of content suggestion? And they started working on a lot of alternatives. It would have been a huge mistake if Netflix just said, we're done, and it didn't work, we scrap it. But instead, they weren't sitting idle. Right? Along the way, they continued to iterate on new solutions, focus on the problem, how can we make content recommendations stronger and better? And since then, they've explored rating systems. Right? They've explored having things grouped by genres and actors, similar directors, themes. And now they're using machine learning algorithms to predict what you'll actually like, what's going to drive your content views. Right? They've been iterating over time. So having a wrong solution is not bad, but it's sticking to it. Right? It's not being able to pivot and be agile and actually figure out what the next step of their product is going to be. And that's a big theme here, right? Product respond to change over time. We don't know everything that we're going to build, and we try our best early on to find the right problem. We try our best to find the right solution, but over time, those things change. Continuous improvement is sort of the theme, the game that we're playing here now, right? The market is constantly evolving, and so must we. Our product has to change, our thinking has to change, and that's how we engage our users with new ideas. So unlike traditional manufacturing, where I think a lot of people think about, like, if I'm building a chair, it's done. It's shipped. It's in your home now. You're not going to come back and be like, hey, can you give me a software update? No, it's done. It's it. You're going to sit on it forever, right? So we must push aside this idea that it's once and done, and then we're given the opportunity now with our technology to improve over time. Especially if you're running cloud native, or if your development team is very agile, you can actually push things on a daily basis, weekly basis. There's a lot of freedom here that can happen, right? These things free us from the burden of being stuck to something. We can continue to learn and improve over time, right? And the last thing I want to talk about, the risk-wise, is building a solution poorly. So what does that mean? So now you found the right problem to solve. You found the solution you want to do it, and you know it's a good solution. It's a proven one. What does that mean? So for example, calendar apps, note-taking apps, things that we know work, right? Everyone has a note-taking app. Everyone has a calendar app. But these are the ones I pull off Play Store, and they look ugly, or they just don't work. I actually downloaded and played with it. It wasn't thoughtful. Right? These are designed poorly, and I'm sure you came across sites like this, and you're like, who built this? This is not useful. I can't even understand how to use this. With a simple note-taking app, you might just go ahead and uninstall it after a couple of tries, right? Or an appointment app, you just go, this doesn't work, and you call them instead. You're like, that's it. I'm going to call my doctor. This app doesn't make any sense. I need to see him today, right? With certain products, you might purchase from a different store or just download a different app. you have options, right? But what about the cost of not building a good product? So we often think about the cost of building a good product as simply lost revenue and user diminish or things like that. But at the end of the day, the company just might lose some money. Right? Who cares? So I want to think about another example with you and just take it in for a little bit. So on October 29th, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 took off in Indonesia and crashed in the Java Sea 12 minutes away. And 180 passengers died. 5 months later, Ethiopian Airlines took flight from Ethiopia and crashed about 10 minutes outside as well, and killing 157 passengers on board. These two flights were operating the same plan, the Boeing 737 MAX. And the original Boeing was developed a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago or something like that, and they've now since made an improvement. But there is a lot of assumptions that was made as part of this development. And this isn't definitively the cause of what led to it. Certainly there might be human errors, certainly there might be other things, but one of the things that they were pilots were stressing was that this is not the same plane. We're not driving the same machinery. And there's assumptions that Boeing made in terms of how the plane operates, how pilots are going to respond to different aerodynamics and things like that, that was missed. Okay? And so they proposed an MCAS system to override those things, but the autopilot system wasn't behaving the way the pilots expected. It was doing weird things where it didn't disengage when they wanted to. It didn't do those things. So now it's a product that may have worked, but it was built so poorly, and now there's a big impact. There is no formal training that's part of this thing, and the instructions were tucked away in an iPad. What can we have done different? Right? What can we have done different as part of this product? Right? We probably could have looked at having more realistic flight simulator training. Right? Things that actually echo real-world experiences versus can you take off, can you land, does this make sense? Right? And consulting with seasoned pilots who early on in the phase of the project were actually giving this feedback and saying, this doesn't work the way we expect it to. This is not doing what we thought it would, and it's going to be a problem. Right? And then so as software developers, getting those things tested and soliciting feedback early on is super powerful. So what we're left with is that we're responsible to think deeply about our users. What may seem like a small assumption about how they're going to behave, how they're going to act when they're in the field, can be catastrophic. Right? Perhaps your banking app, you're thinking, well, it's just a small glitch. They'll come back tomorrow and sign up. But they really need it today because their job's on the line. Right? Or perhaps you're applying for some application, and if you don't have it, it's going to hurt you and your family. There are real risks that we're considering if we don't build our products the right way. And it's not just about lost revenue or a shitty user experience. Okay? Today we're hearing more and more about the adverse effects of technology and the risks that were overlooked early on. We may not always have the answer, but the attitude that we should have is not, oh, well, it's fine. But rather, we must really carefully go find them and make sure we attempt to solve these problems. So deep breath. That was a lot. And I feel like that's an example that really carries home. But let's do a bit of recap of sort of what we just sort of see in terms of the risks that we see and how we talk about overcoming it. So the first one is lack of market need. Right? Building something that no one really wants, there's a problem that no one wants to solve, that's not good. Second one is lack of product focus. There's too many things, you can't ship it, your engineers are pulling their hair, it's too much, it doesn't work. The third thing is building the wrong solution. Right? You're building something that it's good, but not the way you wanted me to solve it. And the fourth one is building something poorly that it doesn't work at all. Right? Our goals, whatever our roles in the organization, right, engineer, PM, design, should be to mitigate these risks. Right? That's our job, really, is to build something that is awesome, not build something shitty. Right? Our goal is not to put something out there for the sake of putting it out there. So we're making clear product decisions along the way. And we don't want to rely on a bunch of assumptions and perceived risk and just going ahead with it. We want to have a way to work them out. So whatever you're working on, either a brand new product or you're incrementally improving some services your company offers, there's a lot of opportunity for design thinking, design research to help reduce that the product risk. Let's go through some of them and think about how we can actually apply this in our day-to-day. Question, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, what about full marketing? Like you mentioned that you
Right.
something, but they just cannot bring it to the market.
So the question was, what happens if the product is good, but marketing suffered, and therefore no one knows about it? And that's certainly the possibility, right? I mean, there's some things that are like, wow, I didn't know about this, but it's awesome. To me, as a designer, that's outside of my control. That's outside my direct control, right? Certainly, I can have conversation with my marketing team to explain the value of this product, how we valued it, how we talked to users and tested these concepts, and therefore you should go sell these things because it actually solves the problem correctly. But if it's outside of my control, there's a lot of reasons why. Maybe your company just doesn't have enough money to support it. So beyond that, if we focus purely on the product decisions that we're making as designers, PM, engineers, what can we control? These are the risks that we want to avoid because we're actively making those decisions every day, every meeting, and so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. But certainly, marketing and other factors could also be reasons why a product can fail. So yeah, thank you. Anything else? Questions, thoughts, as we kind of?
Also, the very first one, like
Yeah.
2, 3, and 4, they kind of like 200% time actually. But the first one is a little bit controversial because very often there is no market for a new product. You create new market by introducing a brand new product.
Right.
So this thing can be like there is no marketing. There was no marketing in I don't know for the iPod, for example. And
Really?
Yeah, there was no marketing.
Tell me about the iPod. Why do you think there's no market need for the iPod?
For the iPod?
Yeah.
Whenever like in 2010 introduced, it was like, why we need it? We need
If there's no market need for the iPod, then Sony would have been dead a long time ago because Walkman was selling like hotcakes.
iPod.
Yeah, iPod.
iPod.
Oh, iPad.
Yes, iPad.
Okay, sorry. I apologize.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's it. There was no need. It was like a brand new niche, a brand new market, like, and then boom, suddenly, okay, it's created.
So the iPad wasn't the first tablet that was built. I'll get to the question later, but that's a really good one.
It's not the first one, but from the perspective of the marketing.
Of course.
And also very often there are a bunch of startups, like like Zappos, for example. They introduced this thing with you could buy shoes even before.
Yep.
But so it's yes and no. It actually depends because sometimes you already have a bunch of people and there is no marketing need for one more thing.
Right.
Like that. However, like people can using the focus, using things number 2 and avoiding issues
Yeah.
with number 3 and 4, they can have something, but there is no need. However, because of the quality, because of the marketing, things may actually work. So
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit, but thank you for that question. I want to talk a little bit more briefly about the difference between a market need and more specifically as designers what we think about as a user need, right? Those needs are generally, right, when we talk about here with lack of market need, maybe that's poorly worded. It's the user, those pains are usually not based on, it's not like a product invented and suddenly I have a problem that came along with it, right? The problem usually exists, there was a need for it, so when I say the market need, it means that your customers have a need that's unaddressed, and then your product came along and solved it. And that's why they're popular. It's not so much like marketing or like what they're buying or things like that. So what I mean by that is, for example, looking at a Google Glass, people weren't talking about we need information constantly. That wasn't a problem that they found was useful. So it's hard to say, well, we're going to sell you a product that's going to fix something. Certainly there was a problem maybe perhaps about notifications or about seeing the world around you, capturing, but you notice that other technology didn't pick up those areas and solve it properly. For example, GoPro, for example, wearables, things like that. So there's a fine difference between that. We can talk about it more after. But market need and user needs are a bit wishy-washy in terms of how it's defined and what perspective we're looking at it from. But thank you, that's a great question. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we really emphasize on is making sure you're talking to your customers, making sure you're engaging them early on. Right? A lot of times that can get missed or we don't understand how much to do and how to do it effectively. But to your point, absolutely, that's something we should be doing early on. So I want to go ahead and move on to the next one, but questions later on. Let's keep going. It's great. So the first thing we want to do is we are now aware of these risks. We are aware of the power of what we can do within your organizations. If there are researchers, if there are people who are thinking about products, let's leverage them and help them, give them the tools to de-risk these things. And the first thing you want to do is identify those opportunities. Right? Where can we actually use our newfound design thinking, design research skills, and apply them? Right? The perfect time is not in the future, it's now, no matter what kind of product you're doing. So as part of product planning, what you can do in the beginning is just writing out your assumptions. Right? This is a project that I worked on maybe a few months ago, and we started listing out everything that in the room that we think we know. Right? What are the things that we think are confident in, and what are the things that we're like, we think customers want this, or we think there's a market for this, or we think this is the workflow they want it in. We start listing them out, all the assumptions that we have, their users, the problems, and maybe even also the technical abilities. Right? We think building this is really easy. Are we sure? Have we done a spike or investigated with our engineers, figure out what actually is involved? So we want to cast a very wide net and then try to understand the assumptions. And then we start writing out actions that we can actually take to figure that out. Right? What are those actions going to look like? Should we go talk to users? Who should we go talk to? What questions do we want to ask? What things are we trying to figure out? Engineers, how can we engage them in this process? So whatever it is, figure out the list of things and start documenting them. Right? It's really a table just of things that we don't know and how do we find out. And then yes, now we know it. It's great. And then the more you do it, the more confident you are that you're moving the right way and that the product goes from risky, not sure, to yes, we know if we ship this tomorrow, it's going to help, it's going to be awesome. Right? The second thing is go to the source, and that's kind of what you were talking about. So it could be both, right? In terms of, say you're introducing a new feature. Right? You're introducing a new feature, I don't know, signing in with like your phone, taking a picture, and it recognizes you. Okay, do we want that? Like, are people going to be working on this? Are going to be doing like maybe it's signing in the dark, in the subway? Do they want to take up the phone and take a selfie and log in? Those are all assumptions that we're like, that's a cool technology. We can build it. We have the APIs. We know it works. Are we sure? Right? And so even as a new feature to just your entire app and your logging in screen, do we know that it's the way we want it to do? So even just listing that out, it might be a shorter list, but it's still very valuable to see what are our assumptions. And then not just looking at design decisions, but also technical decisions, things like that. So whenever you're beginning something new, always look at what are problems that we can face. What's going to hurt us in 6 months? Right? What's going to be that drastic red flag meeting we're going to walk into, and why do we want to stop it right now? Right? That's kind of thing we're thinking about here. Good, awesome. Right. Second thing, go to the source, and really kind of what you were saying earlier, talking to your users directly. Talking to the people who you're designing this for, who you're building the product for. Right? Uncover insights is not thinking about in terms of general numbers and statistics, how many people demographic-wise are doing it. Actually try to understand them. Try to understand what they're struggling with, what they're doing, how have they been solving the problem today, what are they trying to accomplish with this new tool, why are they not doing so? Because we often rely on our internal expertise, right? Our internal folks who are 20-year, 10-year in industry, are subject matter experts, and they have the experience, so we go straight to them because they're down the hall. Larry's there, Jang is here, we can talk to them. They've been here forever. Right? Instead of just going straight to the source and asking them, what do you actually want? A few months ago, I was working on a major bank, and we're trying to build a new platform to help them innovate technologies. Right? And after the product stakeholder kind of talked to us, and they said, well, there's a vision that I have. I've gotten a lot of budget for it. It's going to be great. We started looking closely at what are you talking about here, and we're just documenting a list of things that we're not sure about. Are you sure your customers are going to want it this way? Are you sure your users are going to need this product? Right. What is the workflow that they want? Is it the thing you've kind of put in the pitch deck, or is it something different, a bit more nuanced? Right. We made a lot of assumptions, and now we have a chance to mitigate them. So we go talk to them. That's easy, right? We go talk to them. Finding the people who you're actually designing this for and go having user interviews. In even an informal chat, 30 minutes, showing them some ideas, napkin pictures, wireframes, even just having a conversation. Tell me about X. How have you done X? If we did it this way, would it help? Would it not help? Right. There's a lot of effort that can be done today, and can we actually solve it by just talking to people without going through all these loops and hoops for figuring out the answer. And what we found was that this was actually a shared effort amongst product managers, designers, and engineers, because we're all very invested in building the right product. It wasn't so that designers go or researchers go do the thing, pass that insight to the PMs, they make a decision, and they go on to the engineers and build it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later and how it was done. So in a matter of 5 weeks, we talked to 20 plus people between different lines of businesses, and we got a very clear picture of how it's done today and what we want to move towards. And we went back to the stakeholder and we said, well, you had a list of 30 things perhaps that you wanted to do. These 10 are really what you want. The next 20, I don't see it. I don't think we need to spend money on it. It's going to go to the market faster because of that. But here, we're going to help you do what actually matters. Here's what actually works. And that's great, right? We want to build things that we're confident in and not waste time on things that we don't care about, we don't really know much about. The thing that we know we get to is, well, that's 5 weeks. We're not building any code, we're not shipping any product for 5 weeks. Seems like a lot of time, right? People get nervous when we're saying we're not coding. It's like gotta be hands-on keyboard all the time, right? And that's a big objection I hear, and the fear of doing design research and thinking is we're slowing things down. We're taking too long. We're not moving to the product building phase, which is kind of baffles me because you'd rather build the wrong thing than taking time to build the right thing. That's kind of funny, right? But let's put aside that problem. There's something misguided about it, but design research actually shouldn't take that long if we do it right. It doesn't have to be this long ethnographic research where we learn everything about the user, put a big pitch deck together, and then it's like 6 months later, we learn our customers. We're done. We'll move on now. No. It's something we do continuously, thinking about continuous improvement. So I don't want to talk too much about the practices today because there's a lot of nuance in that. But what I want to share with you is that this is not a new problem we're solving. People like Erica Hall, Thomas Sharon, they have books, they have written articles. You can go on YouTube and find their talks. And they explain how there's an agile process, and then research and design can fit nicely into that if we know how to do it. They're both design thinkers and practitioners, and they have published books and help companies evolve their research process, their design process. And the key to focus on is really creating small iterative cycles. Right? So just focus on the next thing. What's the next question we want to learn? Figure that out, and now build it. Next thing we want to do, figure it out, build it. So there's this nice little pattern that kind of gets established. Small research gets done, and small development gets done, kind of a teeter-totter thing. So who here knows the song like Row, Row, Row Your Boat? Hands up. You get it? Just row, row. Everyone knows this lyrics? Good, cool. Okay, so when I was in school, my teacher made me do this thing where split the class kind of down in half, and then the first group would go, row, come on, row, row, row your boat. Okay, and then you guys go, row, row, row your boat. And there's this like kind of pattern. Have you guys done it before? Or we kind of sing, it's called round. And then so basically you sing the first lyrics, and then they sing it, you go on to verse 2, and by the end of it, they're sort of the last one to sing. And that's something we've done before. It's a very tired choir. We're not going to make you guys sing. But you get the idea, right? And there's sort of this pattern that happens like back and forth, back and forth. And that's kind of the same way when you think about design and development, right? The designers start ahead, a little bit ahead. They start singing the first song, row, row, row your boat. And then the developers say, OK, you figured that out. Great, that's a good song. We're going to sing it together as well. We're going to build it now. Right? So this back and forth happens a lot. And that's really the idea here, right? You'll notice that most of these influential ideas that we're talking about when it comes to product management, agile, design, it's all about this idea of like doing small problems, small steps, and incrementing on it over time. Right? Every design ops, agile ops, PM ops, anything with an ops behind it, really is focusing on that, building small iteration. Right? So on my current project, for example, we're building a new service to help customers find packages. Right? And we realize it's critical not just to understand what they do, but also how they want it to be done. Right? Like not just the options they want to decide on, but how they want to do it. So what we do is every 3 weeks, when we test a new feature, a new design, we talk to people. Now we understand what works, what doesn't work. And the things that do work, we tell our PMs, hey, this is good now. Start writing your stories. Developers start developing it. And it's a nice little cycle that we have. At the beginning, it may have been hard to establish that frequency, but over time, it works out. So you got to trust in that process early on and developing minimal sets of features to work on. And as a team, we're always very comfortable working together. So I've been talking a lot about that, right? You're noticing a theme here where I'm mentioning the designers, the engineers, and PMs all sort of collaborating together. That may be new to some folks. Here in Pivotal, we really preach that. We call it the balanced team, and this is straight out of the Pivotal slide deck. Right? We have designers, we have product managers and developers sitting together, working on things together, and we're all very involved in these product decisions. It's not just one person decide and one person do and one person like color in the circles. I would hate my job. So that's not what we do. We always encourage everyone to collaborate and actually joining in on these sessions when it comes to research, when it comes to talking to people. We have the engineers listening to the customers. That's a novel idea for some of you. And it's also kind of strange. Why are we wasting their time when they can be coding, when they're talking to people, or just listening to people? A couple years ago, I was working at a company called Christie Digital, based out of Kitchener. We make projectors, not these ones, they're shit. We build professional-grade projectors, and you'll find them in like Cineplex, you'll find them in like Disney, Universal. So this is a project I was on with Disney, and we actually flew on site, and we visited the parks, and we were there at night, midnight, parks closed, and Disney is a magical place, especially at night. It's beautiful. And what our job was as designers and engineers was we wanted to shadow the maintenance workers who are responsible for maintaining our projectors. Every night, they got to do every check, make sure everything is working, network is stable, everything's good, and that's their job every single night. And we realized that the meticulous process is taking a lot of time. So from midnight, they start, and by the time they're done the park, it goes to like 5, 6 a.m. And if they miss something or something screws up, then now the rides shut down, and every hour afterwards as the park opens, they're in trouble. Some people are getting their pays docked, who are flying in from places, fixing this ride. It's a huge mess, right? So this is the unfortunate process that we saw, but also an opportunity, right? The engineers actually was the one who kind of taps us on the shoulder and says, I can fix that, right? So they knew what logs we're tracking in our firmware. They knew what things that we already built in the system, and they can easily pull that data out to create a dashboard, to create a sort of an overview look of like, hey, that lamp is going to die really soon. So why don't I just compile a list of lamps that are going to blow, and then the maintenance worker just focus on those guys. And the other ones, don't worry about it. Don't worry too much about it. Just look at it, go over it, but don't spend hours and hours debugging it, right? This wouldn't have been possible if it was just myself or the PM sort of looking around. We'd be like, well, that's really hard. And he's like, yeah, that's really hard. And we're like, good luck. Right? We just moved on. Right? But engineers saw it as an opportunity, and they came back and just started writing out like what they want to build. Here's how we can build it. Here's how we can do it. And our next trip to the park, we started showing them these prototypes, right? Envision, clickable prototypes, really low fidelity, and we were showing them, hey, what if we did it this way for you? What if you had a little tablet or on your phone, a web app, and we just kind of go around the park like, oh my God, solves the problem. That's a cool thing we can build. And that would not have been possible if the engineers weren't the ones who brought it up. Right? So there's a benefit of having everyone considering different factors. Right? You're looking at the designers thinking of the users, but engineers can bring what's possible. They understand what's actually doable, and the PM bring about sort of what the priorities are, what's going to help the business and the users. So that's kind of the thing that I want to talk about. And I want to skip this one real quick and sort of thinking about how we can transform our organization. Right? So we kind of bought into this idea that design is important. We want to think about how we can reduce risk. And there are these methods that we talk about, interviewing people, having people involved in all levels in the research process, identifying risk and mitigating them. We're excited. Right? That's a good thing you want to do. But who here has tried something similar at an organization? I feel like I'm pointing people out. But do you want to kind of talk about your experience a little bit? Or just a little tidbit?
Different places, different experience. Mostly it's just trying to get people onboarded.
Yeah.
Sort of understanding possibilities. I sort of feel like a lot of my job was asking questions or bringing up questions and then thereafter discussions.
Yeah. It's hard to bring about change, isn't it? It's hard to bring about change, even if it's small. I don't believe anything I mentioned tonight would sort of been like novel, like, whoa, that's cool. I didn't think about this before. But it's all kind of very small things. It's the way we change the way we work, but not necessarily changing the big picture. So how do we go from you to two of you to just a big UX party? How do we do that? Right? How do we change that kind of thing? I often hear people say, I love the way this works, but it's not going to work in my company. Or I've done it before, and it's no-go, and I gave up, and that we don't want to even hire designers anymore or researchers anymore. The biggest objection is the fear of doing research, a fear of what can lead to it, what it will look like, how much it will cost, is it actually going to help us? Right? And we spend a lot of time talking about what it is instead of actually trying it. So I want to think about some ways we can try it, and then we can kind of maybe get some, later on can maybe discuss like how it has worked in the past for you. And the thing is, research is not that hard. So first one is to start small. And that's always a really tricky one. It's like you don't want to take this new novel. Am I dead? No, I'm good. Okay, you don't want to take this new novel process and apply it to your flagship product. That's too risky. It's high visibility. Your VPs are going to be on you, and everyone's asking for a deadline. That's not going to work, right? You don't have the freedom to try something. Start something small. Maybe what you were saying earlier, a small feature that's coming up. It's a small one, under the radar. Let's try these practices now and see what happens, right? Or maybe it's a small team that's working on something that's not core to your business. We can experiment. We can try it, and if it fails, not a lot of harm, and we can make improvements as we go on. All right, so starting small. The second thing is being transparent. And that's something I feel like a lot of times designers feel very vulnerable when we're showing them the cards, right? The magician doesn't show the tricks, and why should us as designers show us how we're doing things? We're very comfortable when we're presenting something that's very polished, but while in the skunk work, I feel like don't look at it until it's done. But instead, being transparent helps because they understand what you're going through. There may be opportunity for someone to help you as well, right? But also they understand why this works, how you got there. So when the end result comes, they're not doubting you. They know all along what's happening. So what does that look like? So in the past, what I've done is having posters or things shared amongst my office, so when people walk by, they can see, oh, that's a wireframe. What do you got there? And they can ask questions about it. Or doing lunch and learns, ordering some food and some drinks, and just having people understand our process a little bit, and what we're trying to do this week, the week after. People are really interested in learning. Why don't we give them the chance, right? Being inviting is the next part. Now that they're interested, they might have a project they want to work with you on. Hey, you're doing this research about how customers are shopping. We're doing something very similar on the other end, but a different product line. Can we collaborate? Can you get some of your research? Can you help me out with your templates that you've created, your processes? How do you find customers? Those little tips and tricks are very helpful to have another team excited, another team adapt your practices, and now soon you have allies in your organization who can actually make a change over time. And that leads me to being generous. Right? Just because you've done something for your organization, your team, doesn't mean that's only yours. Share that as much as you can. Have everyone benefit. In the book earlier, Validating Product Ideas, Tomer Sharon works at Goldman Sachs. And now, he used to work at WeWork, now at Goldman Sachs. And this is a traditional bank. Right? This is like old school. They don't think digital for a long time. Now they do. But he just started doing some research, and this other team comes along and says, hey, how can I get involved in that? How can I have you guys help me do research? Well, they don't have the bandwidth for it, but what they did was they said, well, we'll give you all the templates, we'll do a 1-hour tutorial, and then check in with us for office hours. So started setting that up as an office hour, like, hey, my team has done it, we're successful, checking with us every week as you're doing it, and we can exchange ideas and learn. And now, Tomer started as one person. I believe he's now on a team of like 15, spanning across London, UK, and New York. And that team is now growing, and people are asking for their help and begging for it, all because they're willing to share early on and get people's buy-in and getting people excited. Right? That's really important. And the next thing is being collaborative, right? Actually helping as you're sharing these things, working across teams, working across functions, and seeing the result that happens. Because the silos that we're used to in the past don't really work when the customers go across those silos, right? When the customers are looking at things from a whole business perspective, you yourself have to do it as well, right? As a business, figure out what can we do organizationally to collaborate on learning about our customers, offering them value. And the last thing, just because we're here in Pivotal, is be kind. And that's one of our core values here is no matter what you're doing, trying to change a company in terms of design, research, design thinking, or just trying to make a better decision by thinking about the last time you interact with your users, whatever you're doing, winning people over, be kind. And I think people will respect that. People understand that we're all here to do good. We want to build a good product that helps our users, and the way we deliver that is by working together. So that's all I wanted to share with you guys today. I have all the time here to answer some questions. So yeah, that's it. Thank you. Feel free to connect with me. I'm on Twitter. Yeah. Questions, or I'll leave. Yes, please. What is a proven method of design research that I go to most often? I hate to give you this answer. It depends, as you guys know for sure. But I think it starts with, what are you trying to learn? And so that's that mindset. Back when we're in like maybe high school, we think about the hypothesis of the experiment, right? What do we want to learn, or validate or invalidate? And then we determine the method in which we didn't do it. So that depends. Are we trying to just do some usability tests to see, hey, is this going to cause errors? That might change compared to like, we're going to try to figure out the next market we want to tackle, but we don't know what problems to solve. So that could be anything from user interviews to having them compared to do like testing and trying to understand where they're making errors. So there's a lot about that, and I would offer you to kind of look at the books. I can put up on slides. I really recommend those guys. They're really, really helpful. Yeah. Yeah, if you just, there's a lot of things online, and it's really, I always think about it as a researcher, as a designer, I'm like Batman with the tool belt, right? It's figuring out how and when to use it, but there's not a lot there. There's only really 5, 6 methods that we commonly refer to, and certainly there's a lot of online references you can look to. Yeah, that's a good question. Catherine. Yeah. Yeah. I think data gives you a good way to know where to look, but it doesn't explain to you why and the how, right? So data tells you what is happening, right? This many people sign up, this many people use this, for how many days, stop using it, came back one day, and then disappeared. And you can kind of track those things over time, depending on what app you're doing, what customer things you're doing, but it doesn't tell you why. Why did they come back for that one day? What are they trying to do there? And so you have to go talk to them. And oftentimes, it's a good way for data. For me, it's a good way to know where to look, but I never trust that to draw my own conclusions, because then I'm adding my own bias and assumptions. I'm assuming those data points link together because in my mind, I have a story I want to fit in, or a narrative I think I believe in it, right? So let's check those as well. So data is a good starting point. I believe here's what's happening. Write it down as assumptions and go find out, well, is it true? Is it different? And why is it different? And really, you always have to trust the not data one, because data is kind of cold and dark. Talk to your users and see why is it happening that way? What are we going to learn from that? And I would say most times I'm surprised. Right? Most times I'm surprised like how differently they saw the product versus what I'm thinking. So don't trust your data is what I'm trying to say. They're useful tools to get you started, to make your analysis, but ultimately when you're going to learn something about your users, go talk to your users. Yeah. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, I'm going to be around. If you guys have anything for me, I'll be around here. You can talk to me afterwards. But thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this talk. It was fantastic talking about something I'm really passionate about. And hopefully, it will be something that will help you guys as well in your roles. So thank you.